let's talk about play-ins. I guess.
We just start. Here's the thing, you know, something insight. Let's just go straight in the main topic. Mad Lions with this team has just never won a best of 5 ever, including against EG, and now they're not going to be in the real Worlds and top 16.
They did beat Saigon Buffalo.
Oh, they did. Oh, sorry, they did win a best of 5 technically. Yeah, my bad.
They did technically win a best of 5 at long last. But I think what was interesting about Mad Lions is that, so first off, you do have to give them some amount of credit because they were extremely close to beating DRX. And there were things to like about Mad Lions. Like, I think they just completely ran out of gas and were absolutely awful against CG. But they weren't awful for the entire play-ins, guys.
Oh, no.
They almost beat DRX with like a really cool strategy that relied on, they picked the Bel'Veth into them. So they ended up picking the Bel'Veth a bunch of times after that. But they selected the Bel'Veth, and then they counterpicked in the top lane the Camille with the Mordekaiser. They did an early invade, which set Pyosik really far behind. And El Yo-Yo was basically it was like a set play that they used to get the invade, to get El Yo-Yo an advantage. And the pressure from the Mordekaiser in top lane and the roaming from the Vex allowed them to really prioritize Herald, which you want to do with Bel'Veth. So it felt like the first, 10 minutes of that game were just really well scripted by Mad Lions with a really, really solid plan coming in. And unfortunately, what ended up happening, as you guys know, is they were very far ahead, and they started a Baron when Deft was on Sivir and there was a Yuumi in the game, and then the Sivir Yuumi things happened where Sivir runs into a Baron pit, ricochets everybody, kills everybody, and then the game ends.
Almost like that's the champion you don't really want to start a Baron against, some would say.
Maybe. You could argue that if you have a bunch of low range carries like Bel'Veth and Mordekaiser, that maybe you don't want to do that when Deft can kite you, and Deft is one of the best Sivir players in League of Legends history, and he's being powered up by a Yuumi. So it was a bad call, but I don't think it invalidates how good the rest of the game was for Mad Lions, and it gave me a lot of hope for Mad Lions, honestly. And then I think that hope looked pretty good as well when they played against Saigon Buffalo. I think it was a relatively clean series from them. And we got to see the Bel'Veth again. We got to see the Bel'Veth carries again. And
do you think that will be a major champion in the world's main event?
No.
That was just a one-off. Okay.
I think it can work. I think it can work. It wouldn't surprise me to see a player like Canyon pick it up. Maybe Kanavi. Pyosik was actually... There are rumors about Pyosik's Bel'Veth being very good, which is why in LCK we saw in the last best of 3 that we saw between DRX and Damwon, Canyon first picked it in the first game on blue side to take it away from Pyosik. We can only assume that there was some wacky shit happening in the scrims because it was like the first week of availability. Like, why the fuck would you first pick it on blue side unless you were trying to take it away? Or there was some bizarre scrim priority on this pick, and there have been rumors that Pyosik is good on it. And Kanavi and Canyon.
The joke is you could have left that on it. They would just be rumors that he's good. Because right now, we're part of his own team. Don't even think he's good. Maybe.
Well, he wasn't good at Sejuani in that game. He missed all his ults. In the game against Mad Lions, he was terrible. So yeah, I think players like Kanavi and Canyon may show up with it. So there are other fringe cases of junglers who may want to use it at Worlds, and it could be good. I think you see the strength of it if you have pushing lanes and you can get priority and farm up and play around your jungler, which again is something that Damwon and JDG will probably be happy to do, given the current meta. Then there are really good opportunities to use Bel'Veth. So I don't think it'll be the most meta pick, but I think some people will pick it up. Some people.
By the way, even though obviously everyone's going to meme on almost all the players in Mad Lions, I actually do think El Yo-Yo looked pretty good most of the time.
Oh, he looked great.
He had some Smurf games, didn't he?
Yeah, there was... it's hard to read too much into this final because it felt like Mad Lions just never even showed up. It felt like they just never showed up to play today. any point in time. And it looked like they had basically mentally surrendered from the first game. Niski was really uncharacteristically bad. When I saw their first draft, I thought to myself, okay, well, Unforgiven's going to be on the Draven. That's been a pretty common ban, both in playoffs and in at Worlds, even against Unforgiven. So must be doing some damage in scrims for people to know this and not want him to have it. And, they play the Rumble, Vi, Sylas, Draven, Leona. And this composition needs to get early advantages, right? And if you're picking Rumble, I can only assume that the purpose of this is to fight over early objectives and to go after Herald and, fight around 1 to 2 items, get these big leads with the Vi, pick somebody off. But in game number 1, probably the most crucial juncture of that game was the first Rift Herald spawn when Unforgiven just stayed in bot lane. And they got a kill in mid lane by using the Vi ultimate and having Leona and Sylas there as well. But this was while Inspired was doing the Herald because the Rumble was pushed in, right? And so they gave up the Herald for free. Unforgiven stayed in the bot lane, got 1 plate. Inspired had enough time to recall, right? And EG's bot lane had enough time to walk bot, Inspired walked from base and killed Unforgiven while he was alone, pushed up in bot lane. So they got the Herald and it had enough time to recall and rotate all the way back down to the bot lane and shut down the Draven. And I thought that they were going to play towards the Rumble and play towards those objectives or try and stack up early dragons. They didn't do those things. Okay, so that game doesn't work. Sometimes you just take a flyer. This wasn't the strategy that they played against Saigon Buffalo. They played Bel'Veth, they played Hecarim, right, in that previous series. And so they were really seeing success by farming up Elyoya instead of having him play Vi. So we fast forward to the next game. Okay, Elyoya's on Trundle. It's another kind of like early game jungler that you can gank with even faster at level 2 if you're Trundle. So I think to myself, maybe they're going to play through the Draven this time because they have an Ornn in top lane. No, they don't do that. Instead, they try and make plays in the top lane for the Ornn. And they play. So the first game, I thought they would play towards the Rumble and power up the Draven that way. The second game, I thought they would play through the bot lane and power up the Draven that way. They didn't do any of these things. So at this point in time, I'm like, why the fuck are you picking this Draven? Like, you don't want to move Draven to the fight and you don't want to move your jungler to fight with Draven. So
it's like they just did it because he plays Draven or something. That's it.
But it's like the misread on how to play Draven was very severe from Mad Lions. And in 2 different looks, they did the wrong thing both times, which is pretty incredible. And also, the bot lane, like you can't play Draven Leona or Draven Alistar and then fucking like lose to Sivir Yuumi. And what was even more egregious about that game, Thorin, is like the fail dive that they had, which is that Jojo Pion was playing this weird set counterpick to Sylas in the mid lane, right? And EG legitimately played that game extremely well. I think EG was really good in game 2 in particular because they were covering their lanes well. Inspired was great in that series, by the way. Inspired was great. Vulcan was pretty low-key good in terms of the positioning on the map. And Mad Lions, it's like once they made a decision to dive the tier 1 turret in bot lane, even though they saw Jojo Pion and Vulcan coming back from mid lane, they just continued with the dive and then fed the Sivir and Yuumi. And at that point, if you're feeding Sivir and Yuumi as Draven Alistar that early into the game, you're just going to have a terrible time. He's going to have a terrible time. Like Kaiser was bad. Fucking Niski was getting clapped by Jojo. The synergy between Niski and Elyoya was super bad. Like Niski was all-inning when Inspired or when Elyoya couldn't be there and Inspired was there. It was terrible. I mean,
it's forgetting someone, as Jesus says to people having premarital sex.
Armin didn't do anything.
They won 6 games at Worlds. 4 of them he was on Nar. Like, that's not a meme anymore, guys. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, this isn't like season 4. You can't only play like 1 or 2 champions, mate. And some of these are against playing teams. Like, it's really nothing. Because remember, this was the whole narrative with Armo. The whole narrative was, he only shows up in the playoffs. Like he's some sort of fucking rogue figure who just comes in, like rolls in like, ha, ha, ha. Oh, now does the game matter? Well, there was no playoffs in spring. They lost every fucking playoff match in summer, and now he's just bombed out of Worlds. Like, this is really embarrassing, mate. Because the problem I have with that team is, right, remember, Niski is the MVP of the LEC. The other 3 players not called Armour were voted the best player in their role. So you can't now, by the way, spin it around and do what I would do. Like, here's the thing. I can give you the ultimate immediate excuse for Unforgiven. He's a rookie. He's a rookie. He's only ever played 1 playoffs in his life, and this was his second big tournament ever. Like, look, fucking Perks failed internationally. Caps failed internationally. Like, it can happen. But the problem is, like, we're putting these players to our high standard. They're supposed to be a championship roster, and you're not even in the real tournament. And let's be real, EG played well, but everyone's been bagging on them all summer long, going, oh, the LEC would be all these teams. You remember all those comments? Would they even be a playoff team? All that. Well, they just 3-0'd one of the teams that was literally the second best in the split on the regular part. Obviously.
Yeah. And I think they looked good while doing it. But part of this too was it was clear in the what I didn't like about what Mad Lions did was they played a series against Saigon Buffalo the day before with entirely different strategies. And yes, the Bel'Veth was banned, guys, but the Hecarim was just falling through these drafts, just falling all the way to the bottom.
And he smurfed on that early as well when he's playing.
Yeah.
That would have been sick to play, yeah.
So you played your own style that they showed they could almost beat DRX with, by the way, like playing a style where your lanes are somewhat self-sufficient but can get some priority, and then it's Elyoya's jungle pathing that is dominating how you play the map. And in these games, what we see from Elyoya is Vi and Trundle to start things off. And I guess the thought process was this, Thorn, if I had to guess. It's that they see Kaori and they say, okay, this guy's brand new. He's not used to this level of pressure. So we're just going to go after him with Draven lanes and early game junglers and try and just crazily snowball the game. But to Kaori's credit, he did really well. And I think if you compare him to Danny's laning, he looks a lot better, considering that Danny and Vulcan were very weak in lane. Kaori seems more self-sufficient. I think Vulcan was able to roam mid more than times that I've seen EG play recently. It was more reminiscent of Danny in his earlier days where they kind of just used to leave him alone.
Yes.
Kaori was kind of filling that role now, playing a little bit more passively. And he has a better champion pool, certainly has a wider champion pool than Danny. I think it would be shocking to see Danny on this roster again.
I would say he's the better ADC right now.
Yeah. I mean, look, there were some mistakes. Like, we can't look at Kaori and say, oh, you didn't do anything wrong. Like, sometimes he would just randomly die in fights with like all his summoners up, or like he actually, especially in game 1, got caught out in the jungle in a really unfortunate timing that kind of made that game probably take 5 or 10 minutes longer than it should have, because it gave Mad Lions kind of a slight angle back into a game that was basically won. So some of his positioning stuff, especially around vision in the mid and late game, still needs work, but his laning's a lot better and his champion pool's a lot better. And most of the time,
you don't have to play around him all the time, like you said.
Most of the time, his team fighting was pretty good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would probably take a flyer on him at this point in time, especially since he stepped up so big, like flying back from Europe or Turkey or wherever he was, and immediately getting inserted into a stadium event in playoffs and then coming to Worlds. That's crazy to see how impressive he's been under those circumstances.
The problem is, though, and I didn't create this problem, evil geniuses create this problem. Their messaging around Danny stressed that he is family. They didn't even say like he's one of our favorite employees. They stressed that he is family. Well, I'm sorry, if his family and you really care about mental health awareness, then anytime he's ready to come back, he gets the starting spot back, right? What am I missing here? I didn't create that standard. I didn't set that up as the position. By the way, the whole reason you message like his family like that is because like, we really care about him. We're going to support him. And I was like, you can't then be like, well, actually, I'm just going to get a new son. Like, that doesn't work, does it? That analogy will always be fucking gold, mate. You can't just do that. Well, you can't. You'd just be pretty evil if you did, and not in the way they're trying to build, obviously. Again, backdoored it into being evil.
Yeah, they're disowning their family. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe he will be back. Maybe that's what they want to do. But I think the rational move here from a performance standpoint is to put Kaori in. And then, I don't know if Danny's going to be cut out for doing professional League of Legends or
just
being
put
a
him on the
professional
academy
gamer
team
anymore.
or something and swap the positions, you know, and then
That's
see how
true.
he does after a year, then see if he's ready to come back or whatever.
That's true.
Because that's the sad thing, is they already were playing a very specific way around him. But like when he could get through like laning phase and get the fight, he could be really good in the team fights, obviously at times. Like that's what all the highlights are from. So like you don't want to abandon them entirely, especially if this is hopefully not going to be an ongoing problem, whatever he's suffering from.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. You know, maybe it's something that, you know, we're just speculating. We don't know, or I don't know. You might know. I don't know what's going on, but hopefully that can be resolved, and maybe the academy path is the way back for Danny as he slowly introduces himself into League of Legends. I did think he had some very bright spots, so it'd be sad to lose another piece of what could be potentially rising NA talent, but it really looked like it was getting to him watching his player cams in some of those games towards the end.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.